be approved as presented.
Is there any questions? Motion? All in favor of the motion then? Motion's carried. Next, we have the minutes of the previous meeting of October 8th, 2024.
It's moved by Warden McDonald, seconded by Jim Wirt, that the minutes of the meeting, including the in-camera minutes held October 8th, 2024, be adopted as presented.
Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? It is carried. Does any members have any wish to declare a conflict of a pecuniary interest or any conflict? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the presentation delegation consent items. There's no motion for it. Is there anything under the training part of it anybody wants to bring up? See anything? Okay, so we'll move on to the Police Services Board budget. We'll ask Maureen to start us off on this, and then she'll hand it over to Detachment Commander Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think further to our previous Police Services Board meeting, we have our billing statement for OPP for 2025. There was a fairly significant increase, and that is similar to what has transpired throughout rural Ontario. Everybody is experiencing similar increases. It's my understanding that the province is currently taking this back and they're taking a look at it. So I think that there might be potential that there might be some type of review done. I don't know what that would mean financially, whether or not there'd be any type of transitional assistance, but I believe that there's currently a review. Just for the benefit of this group, the EOWC has also sent a letter to the ministry to just express the concern and the increases that are being faced. From a budget perspective overall, this will form part of the county's budget as we approach our budget deliberations on December the 3rd. That'll be also discussed at county council level. With that, from a process perspective, I think I'd like to hand it over to Simon, and maybe he can walk through some highlights that he'd like to bring forward on the budget.
Yes, thank you very much. As we've discussed, it's both the delivery of the message was somewhat abrupt and not well received, and I can certainly empathize with the counties in terms of how that messaging was delivered. I'd just like to speak, if possible, to some of the aspects of the budget and some local considerations as well, because I know that's another frustrating piece, is that a lot of the budget process, as compared perhaps to a municipal service, there is less input at times, and I could only imagine that at times it's sort of like this is your dish that you're receiving, and I hope you enjoy it. And I personally would like to work very hard to ensure that that's not, or to minimize that sensation if that is in fact the case. Locally, as you know, our billing model is based upon a base service fee, which is the legislated policing that we're mandated to provide, and also pays for inspectors, staff sergeants, like the whole communication system, all the specialty units that we can bring to bear for an investigation, whether it be tactical, aviation, emergency response, canine, underwater search and rescue, recovery, sorry, as well as major criminal investigations, anti-rackets, and there's a long list of resources that is part of the provincial mandate, but also for that base cost is what is provided to the services, the communities serviced by the OPP, and under the new CSPA, whereas before, again, as part of our provincial mandate, we have provided a lot of those services to other services under, I believe it's Section 14. There are going to be new Section 14 agreements whereby the OPP could operate on a cost recovery basis for some of those services. So there's a lot provided in that base cost, which is I believe it's $189.44, and then it's also the calls for service. So when it comes to provincial calls for service, so on the highways or parks, the municipality is not billed for that, and nor any overtime that's related to that. Also, under the base cost, it's also the proactive work that police officers do, as well as, for instance, ride programs, all that are all encapsulated in that base cost. Calls for service is where the municipalities will be charged on a calls for service basis, and so for criminal investigations or mental health calls and the like. So the cost per house, as you can see, is for SDG is $354.30, and the average provincially, I believe, is roughly $399. So again, that's per household. The overall increase is obviously quite drastic. However, it still comes to that amount per household. In terms of the increase, as with many other, if not all, police services and/or organizations, the majority of money that needs to be put forward is for salary dollars. So in the SDG, in the OPP's case, the last contract terminated December of 2022, at which point the OPP members were without a contract until roughly, I believe, June of 2024 when it was ratified. In that contract, which goes until December of 2026, there was a overall increase of 12.4% salary dollars for the members. Now, very generous and I would argue well-deserved for our members, and it was, however, on the provincial average, it puts us in line with a lot of the municipal agencies. However, there are other agencies that far exceeded that, and again, it's a very generous increase that was given to the members of the OPP. However, just again, it just puts us in, it doesn't put us any further ahead in terms of other municipal agencies. And the thing about salary increases for police agencies is that quite often the difference is within a few $100s, and especially when negotiations start, you might be number 1 in the province, and then within a few months you could be number 6, and that's just the reality of policing. Also, furthermore, in terms of the overtime, when it comes to our overtime is categorized into regular, recalled, shift shortage. So there's some different categories. So shift shortage obviously speaks to we have put in place minimum numbers that we expect on a platoon to report for duty and deal with the calls that come in and do the proactive work. And if it should fall below that minimum, then it's considered shift shortage. So for every time that overtime is categorized as shift shortage, it's spread across the entire province, and it's not paid at time and a half, it's paid at straight time and split. As I said, I spoke to Municipal Policing Bureau, and they explained that it's that straight time is incorporated across the whole province, so it can either sort of stabilize that aspect of it. Furthermore, in SDG, the detachment commander goes through every overtime submission to ensure, because it's obviously on a computer system. It's called DAR, which are daily activity reports, and they've just recently updated the whole process to capture information better and to actually draw through technological advancement. They can actually draw. If I'm working on the road, it will auto-populate my calls for service into that daily activity report. And currently, it being me, I will sit there and go through all 100-odd members and go through all their overtime to ensure that it is categorized properly, because if it isn't categorized properly, then it wouldn't fall under that shift shortage and wouldn't mitigate the overtime costs locally. So that's something, and from speaking to a majority of detachments across Ontario, not many, if any, detachments do that, and that's something that's been in place in SDG. I remember Mike Mulhern was doing that, and other detachment commanders were doing that previously. So that's just another effort locally to try to mitigate the overtime costs. And just speaking in terms of the local perspective, I know I feel this way, and I can't speak for other detachment commanders, but I would suggest strongly that they feel the same, in that we do our best to identify improvements locally. Of course, we have provincially mandated guidelines and police orders and programs. However, we do our best, primarily in collaboration with our partner agencies and other institutions within our detachment area, to try to find ways of improving our service, and also through technological advancement at times, also finding ways to improve our service, as I said, and just do our work more efficiently. So, for instance, locally, we've already submitted decision notes to have detachment operation clerks, and so what that is basically is they will do a lot of the paperwork for the officers, build a lot of the briefs, and the intent of that is that the officer can come in, and a lot of the big cities have that already. You come in, you hand in your notes, you provide some tombstone information, and these detachment operation clerks, who are civilians, would then put all that packaging together, or the brief, and then submit it, and it optimizes the use of the police officers. We've also prepared a decision note to increase the number of our special constables. The OPP is currently going through a organization-wide special constable review, and as with the changes in the CSPA as to the training and expectations and abilities of the special constables, we're looking organizationally at ways we can employ special constables more, again, to ensure that the constables can do the policing work that they're required to do. So locally, we have put in a decision note to increase that by 2, and we're waiting to hear on that. There's also there's a system, again, speaking of technology, ALPR, which is automatic license plate reader, and it used to be, you used to see the cruisers with sort of the cameras on the hoods of the car. Now it's built into the in-car camera system, and it's incredible. Again, Europe is way ahead of us in a lot of ways in terms of plate readers, and my family's from the UK, and they've had CCTV and plate readers there for quite a while. And but now we can put in a plate, say we're looking for a plate or a stolen car or a missing person or a person in crisis. We can put that plate provincially into the system, and every time it's picked up on a camera, on a cruiser camera, it'll auto-populate or do something in the background and let us know sort of where that car was. And all our officers are trained in the East region, so including SDG, and we all have body cameras, which links into the in-car camera system as well. And again, through that advancement, it's also providing better evidence for the courts, and you can the system itself transcribes, actually, if we're having a conversation, it will actually transcribe what's being said and provide a written or a typed statement as to what transpired. So, and again, in terms of technology and collaboration, I have, since my time here, met with Ben DeHaan from the counties, because previously we used to have a committee that involved engineers, roads, municipal public works officials. So, for instance, if there's a problem area, say a section of County Road 2, there's a speeding or traffic issue, well, we would examine, is it because of the road configuration? Is it strictly an enforcement issue? So Ben and I had a really good conversation about some possible ventures that we could take part in, whether it be, again, road construction and or community safety zones, speed limits, and we also discussed the implementation of some speed cameras in certain locations. So again, but the police aren't the be-all and end-all, and the police will never solve all the world's problems, and the police will never be the sole source of rectifying every issue. It has to be collaborative, and it has to be, a lot of times it isn't a police issue, but we can be a very active partner in finding a resolution to that. So in terms, I have the annual summary as well. However, in terms of the budget, may I open, Mr. Chair, may I just at this point ask if there's any questions from any of the members?
And Simon, these comments have nothing to do with the quality of service that we've received from you and your detachments. I think it's been exceptional. And I sit here now, I think I'm in my 6th or 7th year, and every time we come in here, it seems that you guys are gaining more and more responsibilities to look after under the same budget. And perhaps that's the reflection of what we're looking at whenever we take a look at this increase. However, now that I'm back and not involved on counties, I can only appreciate what Brian and Jamie are facing whenever they come to budget, because the threshold is continuing to become more and more concerning for taxpayers. And I guess my comment comes back that maybe we have an opportunity here now to evaluate at a higher level. And I've been a proponent of technology because I think that essentially the skill set that your officers have is being wasted by trying to chase guys on highways where we have the technology, as you mentioned, that could redirect those responsibilities to other areas. So I guess what I would like a consensus on, or maybe Maureen to come back in the future and comment on, is this an opportunity where we could take a look at putting together some of the technology that would not only address the financial issues, but maybe bring us closer to what's happening in Europe, because that tech is working, and it's incredibly, positive, the responses that they've had. And I'm a little mystified, to be honest, as to why we're not doing it here, because it's essentially the same challenges, and they've faced them probably 10 or 20 years ago, and we're now facing them. And I would suggest that, we ask our staff, or perhaps we find funding that could compile a study that would say, these are areas where we could invest money wisely for the long term and try and create a situation that benefits not only the taxpayer, but our police services as well, that we could, use your expertise in areas that are really demanding and take some of this nominal stuff off the list and transfer it to some kind of tech support. So it's just a comment, but I really feel that this topic isn't going to be going away. Your workplace is only going to become more and more complicated as we put all these intricacies together, and perhaps, reevaluating all your responsibilities could lead to a positive result for everybody, that we could understand better, that you have an increased presence in areas where there would be a lot of public support, and at the same time we could implement control through some of the technology that's available. So I'm just putting that out there, but I think we have an opportunity here to at least have this discussion.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I would like to also state that the collaborative relationship between OPP and Simon and our Director of Transportation, Ben, has been excellent. And we've always had a good working relationship with the OPP. County Council will see in the budget document that's going to be released in the next couple of days, Ben did put some money into our budget specifically to look at enforcement on county roads. So there is some funding there. I believe that we might like to pilot a couple of initiatives, but also too, if we need to gain some external advice, or if we need to look outside of what our own resources are, I think that the budget will help facilitate that. And so my recommendation would be, at this point in time, maybe considering where we're at with the county budget, which we hope will have some adoption by the first week of December, then maybe we follow up in a Police Services Board meeting in January, and Ben and Simon can both come back and speak to what we have funding for and what what they're anticipating we could start to look at for 2025. So I think that administratively and from OPP, we agree with what you're saying, Jim, and so I'd like to be optimistic that we're going to start to go down that path to look at technology as a mode of enforcement as opposed to, having to utilize OPP resources.
Yeah, and I think the reassuring thing here is like all of us have connections right across the province essentially that are having this discussion, and perhaps Warden's Council or somebody at that level could say, let's put some dollars behind this so that we do it right out of the gate rather than trying to reinvent the wheel.
I appreciate Steve's comments. For the simple fact is, obviously, and I appreciate that, Simon, when you looked at me a little bit there when we talked about highways and monitoring for speeding and issues since we did talk about the last meeting. But again, I think if we're looking, in fairness to the local OPP and Simon, I think if we're following the local media right through Ontario recently, this issue of financing OPPs is not just a local issue, it's right across the province of Ontario. And I think it may be an issue you folks are going to have to bring up with the provincial government sooner than later. When it comes to Steve's comments in regards to monitoring of intelligence through communications or apparatus, for example, like the City of Cornwall has put many of those speed monitors up on roads, and I know there's one by Holy Trinity now on Tiletown Road. I think these things are valuable for the simple fact is it does make people think twice when they are driving, and it's just another decoy in my opinion. So again, I appreciate the CEO's comments as well as to alleviate some of the pressures on the OPP. I think it's due diligence if it is looked at, and again, your words through the Wardens Caucus of Eastern Ontario and so forth across the province. That's probably a great way to start, is at that level and let it transpire through. But I appreciate your words, Simon, and I do know you got a lot of work to do with the provincial government as well, let alone what you're going to do to these folks at the municipal councils. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And just in response to your very insightful suggestions, I know that currently, well, not just currently, but our commissioner, since he's taken over, has really explored every avenue in terms of altering the way we do business. He came from York Regional Police, again, where there's the municipal entity is not, I've never been one to say, oh, one is better than the other. Everyone has pros and cons, and again, I think by working together and learning from others' successes and failures, it's a lot better than having, reinventing the wheel, as you said. And to your point, just of course the budgetary items, it is a provincial matter right now, and I think just Simon's opinion, but just obviously on a provincial scale, it's obviously where as opposed to perhaps certain municipalities could ratify a new collective agreement and increase their police budgets. It may not be noticed on such a grand scale as it is obviously provincially, and also it affects a lot of smaller communities across Ontario with a limited tax base as well, which is also why it's been a lot harder pill to swallow. But in terms of the innovation standpoint, and again, perhaps for a cost-saving measure at this point, I could, through the OPP, there's actually a whole new portal. It was driven through, it was encouraging officers actually to come up with ideas about innovations on the front line, but there have also behind the scenes been a lot of reviews and exploration of the implementation of technology, and that's why you've seen in the last few years the change in technology, although it does take time to put into place just because of the size of our organization and our province. they are, our organization, we are looking at many, many different technological advances and how to employ them. So perhaps I could reach out to our headquarters in terms of what programs they're exploring currently, what programs have been implemented, and where they're going from here. I know that organizationally, again, that leaders and heads of sections are traveling and collaborating with agencies around the world in terms of best practices. So I think there's a lot of work that has likely already been done and is being done that hasn't been broadcast, and perhaps as an aid for the Police Services Board. And as I said again, prior to having, and this is merely my suggestion in terms of engaging a consultant at this point, I could at least report back to you locally as to what is being done with the organization, and then I could also, at the same time, take back suggestions that we've received locally for technological advancements, should you wish me to do that.
Okay. Just, you talk about your cameras, integrated camera system, being with the officers and police cars. Are there any stationary or cameras placed at key spots, like say on the 401 or some of the major highways? I know you've come a long way in the car theft. You see the numbers dropping fairly significantly over the last year, and that's because of the extra work you as a group have been doing. Is that something that is being considered, maybe something a little more what they've done in Europe with some of these camera systems?
I know that the Ministry of Transport has a lot of cameras, especially on the highways, and there are some grants that I've seen that have employed the use of CCTV. I think at times Canada has been somewhat resistant to the full implementation of CCTV as opposed to Europe. However, I do see more and more cameras employed in towns and cities and villages, so I think it is something that is advancing, and even to the point that the cost has come down so drastically. You even look at security measures around detachments or offices, and to actually install a system, the cost has come way down. So to answer your question, I know Ministry of Transport does. I know that in certain grant applications they have, OPP and municipal partners have utilized cameras, but it's definitely something we can employ more. And as I said, perhaps if I can come back, because I know photo radar has been a topic provincially for several years, many years. It was present and then went away, but I can also, at that point, maybe come back and present as to sort of where we're at in terms of the use of cameras such as that. But it's a great tool in the moment, but it's also a great tool from an evidentiary purpose as well, from an intelligence perspective. So it is a very worthwhile tool. So.
And what Jim was speaking about, the new technology they have out there today, at their last conference, I stopped at one of the booths there, and they have this new camera system that they set it right on top of the LED street lights, and it picks up the speed, everything, and once it's recorded, then it's sent off to the OPP. There's so many different ways of finding different technology for cameras right now. I think it's advantageous for us to look into that for sure. Yes.
Mr. Chair, just others' conversations stimulate my brain cells and I remember things. But just to that point, I know that, again, working collaboratively and from a municipal standpoint, it might not be as relevant considering, as I said, what we do on the provincial highways aren't paid for by the counties. However, just to speak to some of the technological advances, we do work in partnership. I was just in a meeting last week with MTO partners, speaking about the increase in fatal motor vehicle collisions primarily on provincial highways and primarily involving commercial motor vehicles, and just try to identify some strategies, again, with our partners. But there's technology, for instance, on the 401 where they can determine if there's a traffic backup based on Wi-Fi usage, or they have like sensors in the road and what have you, and they can, if there's a mass of Wi-Fi usage in a certain area, they can determine, okay, well, we have a traffic backup here, there's something going on, what's going on. Camera systems, I know the county, I mean, for years there's been sensors in the roadways to determine, okay, what's the temperature of the roadway, and do we need to apply aggregate or salt or sand or what have you. And so there's so much technology out there, and we're just scratching the surface, I think. And even for a dinosaur like myself, I'm recognizing the benefits of a lot of this technology that you speak of. So,
Any other discussions on this item? Go ahead, Jim.
My final comment, and this is just for Jamie's sake because he loves to hear me make these comments, but when we talk about the technology that's available, you know, and I go back to the guys and girls that are involved in this budget process, but the dilemma we face in Eastern Ontario with our colleagues in Western Quebec as far as being able to follow up on, you know, traffic infractions. Just imagine if that revenue was at play in this budget process. And that tech is there. We just have to make sure we have the political will to see it through. And I'm mystified, to be honest, why both governments haven't had this conversation previous to this, because it's, why are we chasing Quebec plates if we have no recourse to deal with them? So just another example of where we could be rather than where we are.
Okay, thank you. Would it be possible, or is it, you think it would be something that we could do and take an opportunity at the next conference to bring it up to the province that, you know, for the deficit of 719,000 that we're facing, or in other municipalities are facing throughout Ontario, maybe to have a meeting with them, maybe the Solicitor General's office?
Sorry, you're referencing Roma as an example? So I was thinking about that. I was holding off to see if the province was going to make any announcements with respect to funding. We can put a delegation request through. I would imagine many municipalities are probably doing the same. So I would look to the board, but I'm happy to put in that delegation request. And then if we're not successful, we might not be successful because there might be some form of announcement that might come out before that time. But I would maybe look to Warden McDonald to see if he has some thoughts.
There we go. Sorry, I was hitting the wrong button. Yeah, I think though what we're seeing is there is a concerted effort throughout the province, and it's starting to, you know, even though at the Warden's Caucus we're one of the few county systems that actually control the billing of the OPP, it's generally done by small, tiny municipalities, and that's a big issue also there, because if you're looking at some places that have 1,000 residents and their OPP costs are going up $400,000 or $500,000, that's a big cost to a small municipality. So I truly think that we're going to see the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus and the Western Wardens Caucus are going to be working, to bring this message. And we're on that. We get those emails to support other municipalities, and we're getting those left and right now. So I truly think that we're going to hear something from the province. That's kind of been, I know you can't speak to it, but that's kind of been the rumor that they're going to step up for this year, and for this year only. And so anyways, I can't hurt to put in a delegation request, and we can always pull it back, but I really think there's going to be a concerted effort through the caucuses.
Yes, go ahead, please.
I apologize for continuing to add to this, but I'm just thinking too, if, I mean, the reality of policing as a whole, not just the OPP, is that, as I said, the majority of the budget is tied to 90% of the bill for policing. I'm just wondering if, as we progress through this current collective agreement, if it would aid the counties to provide just some reminder or sort of the a gauge or where we're at in terms of, okay, well, there's a collective agreement coming up in 2 years or what have you, and it just from a planning perspective, we could do, I don't know what information you could provide, but maybe, as I said, just as simple as an update is, or a reminder is, okay, in 1 or 2 years, the collective agreement is coming due, and it's just something to consider.
I just want to make my comment on that, but, you know, I love how, and we see this all the time, that we're 2 years into your contract, we finally get an agreement, everybody sits back and goes, "Phew, we got an agreement," and nobody does anything for the next 2 years, and then we're going to be 2 years behind. And I guess that is something that we can discuss with the provinces. Let's get moving on getting these agreements done on time, and so that we can plan for the 4 years, as opposed to having to pay for 2 years that have already gone by. So it's really hard on our budget processes, and sometimes I don't think the province feels that pain that we feel, and which always surprises me, because if you look at the how many people that are MPPs are generally, I would say there's a high percentage that have already been on a local council, so they know the pain we're feeling, and you know, I never know what they do. I'm just, so that's just my comment, that I think, you know, you're right. I think we need to, we're 2 years in, so let's start pushing the buttons to make sure that we're not going to be 2 or 3 years into the next one and finally get an agreement. So thanks for those comments.
And just to that, like, I know there are places where that happens, and I understand and grasp the enormity of our province and our provincial infrastructure. However, I think that would go a long way in terms of, as you said, preparation for budget. And even if you look at the grant process, for instance, the grants that I'll speak of, should we be successful, the money has to be spent in a very restrictive time period. So even that whole, and I get the size, the enormity of it. However, and just to their point again about seeking advances or ways to do things better, I think, as you said, I agree with you that there's obviously ways that on a grander scale things can be improved upon. So,
Madam CEO?
Through you, Mr. Chair, perhaps, you know, in some of my discussions with other CAOs in Eastern Ontario, to have to continuously apply for that grant funding doesn't make sense. So these programs are good programs for prevention, for mitigating other costs within OPP. And so the frustration, I think, amongst some CAOs is that you shouldn't have to continually apply for the funding. It should be dedicated funding, similar to the investment that SDG puts into the police services budget for the mental health resource. Those are things that we're investing in, and yet if there's other detachments that don't have that type of resource or support, you know, that would contribute to the overall cost of the provincial billing model. So I think those are just to provide some information to the board. Those are some of the discussions that are happening amongst the CAOs in Eastern Ontario.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just one more question, probably pure for more educational reasons than any. So outside of the cost, why are photo radars through municipalities, and maybe Maureen, through your experience from the city of Cornwall, people so hesitant to put them in? But when you look at Quebec, they have no issue. City of Ottawa, I think, is going to put 14 more. 76 more. Why? Maybe I'm just pure educational, and we're talking about issues that Jim's brought up. Why is there so much hesitation in regards to this?
Jim hit it right on the head. Political will. That's what we have to do something like that to move forward. I think that's the problem right here. and a lot of other provinces are not, in favor of these photo radars. But I think, as you said, Jim, it would save a lot of resources, time and money, and it would be beneficial to the taxpayer for sure. So I think maybe, Simon, do you have an extra explanation?
If I could answer that. Mr. Chair, I think I could answer a lot of different aspects of life. I agree with you, and there's a lot of cases where this technology is already in play, and a lot of the arguments against some of the implementation of that technology has already been tested and determined to be either false or not relevant in other areas. So again, I do not have an answer as to why, and I would suggest that, political pressure and or not even political pressure, but just working through a lot of those locally, and then, at a larger scale provincially, but definitely locally, working through those at times, and majority of times, perceived obstacles, and getting over them, because many other municipalities, provinces, countries have. And of course, we realize there's different charters and rights and regulations across the world. But that being said, I'm sure we can find common ground in terms of a lot of those programs. So.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Just quickly, I think when we got a report from Ben a couple of years ago talking about photo radar, it's very costly. The cost to collect the tickets is excessive. So there's a whole bunch of things at play that, I look at the city of Ottawa, I think they're just doing it on pure volume. You're looking at the amount of tickets that are being processed, and so I think sure they're doing it on volume, and I think if we're going to do it here, I think we have to do it. Like if we're doing it in the counties, everybody in the counties has to take part into it, but I could imagine how many just on the 401 that you would get. I mean, it's insane the speeds that people are traveling into. Jim's point, once you get to close to this side of the border going this way, you'll see the plates of the cars that are zipping past you are Quebec plates, and if they don't have to pay the bill, as long as they don't get caught again in Ontario, they'll never have to pay that ticket. So, anyways, just a comment. Thanks.
I guess the one advantage is the safety part of it too. I mean, it's a little slow traffic down, and it's the whole premise behind these. And also, there might be a good revenue coming in for it too as well. But again, there's a cost for the administration part of it for sure. But we'd have to look at what the balance would be on that and the offset costs. Go ahead, Todd.
Just in conclusion, I guess my final comment, because I want to be on record saying this, I mean, you can't put a price on a life. And at the end of the day, I think upper levels of government, including municipal governments, have to actually get serious about this. For the simple fact is, it's out there, it exists, it's a product that works. May have some technicalities that can be itched out or sketched out. But I mean, at the end of the day, we see collectively through negotiations, be fire departments, police departments, and so forth. At the end of the day, to get their point across, they usually use life. When it comes to photo radar, at the end of the day, it's life. That's just my 2 cents.
So, is there any other discussion? And I'll pass it over to Madam Clerk to get back a little bit into the budget items.
Sure, through you, Mr. Warden, I can give a very quick overview of page 11 in your package. It's just the specific board budget for 2025 that we're proposing. If you look at the top, the police services revenue for 2025, you'll see the standard revenue items have been included. Ride funding, this is for the various ride campaigns that the OPP administers each year. Provincial funding, we haven't noted any funding in there as of yet, but Detachment Commander Hardy has advised that the OPP locally have applied for the Victim Services grant once again, and the MCRT enhancement grant. That's that grant to enhance our mental health nurse program. Looking at criminal reference check revenue, you'll see about a 25% decrease in this area. This is a directive from the province, so they're taking a new route on this and rolling back revenue year over year until 2028. So there is a slight decrease there that we'll see this year. And the alarm program, we're moving into year 2 of our 3-year cycle. So this is a break-even program here at the county. We do use reserves that we accumulate over the 3-year cycle to offset the program. Moving down into expenses, again, this is the alarm registration program. This individual budget includes wages, benefits, equipment, office supplies, advertising, and postage for the program. The OPP contract, I think we've discussed that. I will note that 2023 year-end adjustment of $719,316, it won't be reflected in the 2025 budget. It will be a variance to the 2024 budget. The RIDE program victim services lines, unknown yet if we'll receive funding, but we will add it to the board budget if funding comes in. The mobile crisis response team, this amount covers the cost of the mental health nurse in partnership with the Cornwall Community Hospital. This was moved to the police budget last year from the council donations budget just to provide ongoing and stable funding for this initiative. Police Services Board expenses, this includes board wages, mileage, meetings and conferences, and office supplies. Memberships, legal and audit fees. This includes the board's OAPSB membership, which has increased. The association has expanded its services as a result of new legislation, so they now have a full-time staff on board to help us provide training. They're ramping up their conferences and whatnot, so I'll begin in the new year to start sending you that information again to participate with the association activities. This line also includes an increase in the county's audit fees for the board as per the county's new audit contract. Community initiatives, we've included $5,000 this year to spend in 2025. So Detachment Commander Hardy will bring back some great ideas for that in the new year. But if you have any ideas as well, please let us know. And then insurance. So this is a new cost in the PSB budget. As per the new legislation, boards are required to have standalone insurance. So we've included the amount for that in this year's budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just, did you want me to discuss the review of the year briefly?
Sure, that would be great. Thank you.
Shall I wait for?
You can go ahead on this one.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure before we pass the motion that Councillor McDonald was here. That was really important.
So
that
again,
everyone's
just
here.
to summarize the 2024 accomplishments that are provided in your package, the Mobile Crisis Response Team, or MCERT, again, is proved dividends and ensuring that people in crisis and the vulnerable sector of society are put in contact with appropriate resources. Our nurse and assigned officer are very proactive in terms of reaching out to not only monitoring calls for service, but also getting referrals. And it's, again, paying dividends. And speaking of technology, we're also looking at different ways of capturing that data and presenting that data, so it's more tangible in terms of exactly calls for service, referrals, reduced wait times, what have you. And you've heard it before, but again, to reiterate that this program, first and foremost, as you said, sir, that you can't put a price on life or how we treat people, and how we, especially the vulnerable people in our society, and you cannot affix a price to that. However, it does reduce calls for service, and it does reduce strains on our healthcare system, which are also great benefits from a more tangible standpoint, but from the human standpoint, I don't think you can really put a price on that. So again, another successful year, and we've applied for more funding again to ensure that, because currently the program is Monday to Friday, we're now applied for supplementary grant to ensure that we can return to the 7 days a week program. In the you know, I spoke under the base cost of a lot of the services that are provided within that. Locally, the beginning of this year, had a canine unit return to the area. There was always one assigned here, but there was a period where there wasn't one who was residing locally and working locally. However, this year we had Brad Loyan, who successfully completed the canine program and now has a canine that we use for missing person searches, fugitive searches, and other police applications from an enforcement standpoint and from a humanitarian standpoint. So it's really great to have that resource here, and he will also go on patrol and what have you, and assists our municipal partners as well when they require a canine. Likewise, our emergency response team, we had 2 members successfully complete the training the summer of this year, so they're based out of the Long Sault detachment, and again, they have they're a provincial entity. However, in the times that they are not deployed elsewhere to a call, they are local, they do take calls for service, they do assist, and they provide that immediate resource from a emergency response standpoint locally. And again, local officers who are working out of SDG now, which is a great asset. Speaking of technology, the whole OPP is transferring or moving to a new radio system, the Land Mobile Radio Network, LMRN. So recently, all the SDG members completed that training. All East Region members are in the process of completing that. So the next stage is other parts of the province have already started that, and this new radio system will also work in conjunction with other ministry partners and have some higher security features and encryption and what have you. So the next step is our cruisers will be outfitted with the new radio system, and then once the entire province is all trained and has the new radios in their cruisers and on their belts, then they will transition to that. So very exciting for that. It's a really good system, and again, that's just one of those costs that gets incorporated into that the base budget. And communications, as I'm sure you're aware, is a huge cost, especially with the geography and landscape of Ontario and rural Ontario. You have to invest a lot of money into that, so that's another exciting standpoint. Community engagement, again, our officers are majority are residents of SDNG. On and off duty, they're very involved with community events, whether it be sporting events, fairs, school events, and that's continued in conjunction with our auxiliary unit, who's still, we're actively recruiting because provincially the auxiliary numbers have dropped somewhat, but we're actively recruiting and trying to get more members into that program, recognizing the importance of it. And just in that standpoint, in December, SDNG is lucky enough to be receiving 2 cadets. So the cadet program was something that was in the OPP, went away, and has come back. A lot of police services have cadet programs, and the cadet program is more so for especially younger persons who are looking for a career in policing, and just that transitional period from post-secondary education to the workforce. But the cadets will be of great use to us in the detachment. And as I said, to get 2 is quite lucky. Most detachments will get 1. So they can be employed with our collision reporting center, fingerprints. They can go on patrol with officers. Can be heavily involved in community events as well. So we're very excited for their arrival. I believe it's December 7th. So we're looking forward to that. Again, as is listed, a lot of community programs. Speaking to traffic safety, our enforcement in terms of offenses that have been issued was up 21% from last year, and rides through ride programs, 778 were completed, which is an increase of 17% from the year prior. Also within SDNG, and again incorporated into that cost, is the Marine unit, and SDNG has a large amount of waterway on both sides of the dam, and we staff a boat throughout the whole summer period, and especially when you speak of local tourism and all the people that are drawn in, whether it be on their boats or at beaches and what have you, we find it's very important to have that. A lot of positive interactions, a lot of visits to cottages on the island, crime prevention, and again, acts as a resource to assist our other partner agencies or other municipalities. So we're lucky to have that. They're very active again, as is listed there. And speaking of cooperation with other partners, Highway 138 is, as long as I've been here, has always been an issue that's been brought forward. And I mean, we see construction there, and there's still movement. We're still doing our part to try to be part of the solution in regards to Highway 138. The Victim Services Grant, as was alluded to, as you're aware, the last Victim Services Grant ran out, and there was a strategy, a bridging strategy to ensure that the valuable services of the Victim Services Advocate continued within our detachment, and she's embedded within our detachment, which has proved great dividends. I know, speaking personally, there's been some tragic events in my time here. Again, I don't know what version this is of Simon Hardy and SDG, but unfortunately there's been some tragic events, and we've actually deployed the Victim Services Advocate with an officer out into the field to try to mitigate some of the trauma that the involved people are experiencing, which has been a great resource and great to see. Again, from that human standpoint, we're waiting. We've submitted a follow-up Victim Services Grant. We're just waiting to hear as to whether or not we are successful. So, and to your point, Warden McDonald, if we can find, it's the CAO, if we can find a way to minimize the need to complete grants on a frequent basis, we'd be very supportive of that. So, best of luck. And just in terms of the accolades and recognition, as with policing as a whole, hiring and retiring goes in waves, and we're into one of those waves again. So over the past year, there's been a few retirements. So some of the sergeants that you may know, Matt Emer, Charlene Davidson, and Constable Dan Moray, Sergeant Dan Loney, who was in-service training and an emergency response team member for years, he retired. We've also, and with retirements come promotions, so within SD&G, earlier this year, 2 staff sergeants were promoted, so Staff Sergeant Alicia Birch and Staff Sergeant Norm Lamontagne, who has worked out of Glengarry for a lot of years. And Staff Sergeant Birch was working in North Dundas and then has done some other postings and experiences in the OPP, and now she's come back to SD&G as a staff sergeant. Also, we had a sergeant competition recently, and 3 new sergeants were identified. So one is Scott McWhirter, who's a longtime Glengarry officer, very well respected by the community and the members themselves, so a great addition. And we're also 2 other members were promoted. They come from outside the detachment area, but again, very excited for the experience that they bring to our detachment area. So one is Sebastien Pical, who's from Russell County, who's going to be working out of SD&G, and then Ryan Cruikshank. As soon as I heard the name, I said, oh, he must be local to SD&G. He is not. But family connections in Eastern Ontario, and is coming from Kappas Casing. Both of them at one point worked in Northern Ontario, and for those of you that know policing in Northern Ontario, it can be very challenging. Resources are sparse because of geography, so even in terms of years of experience, officers that generally come from northern postings tend to have experienced a lot in their short time. So very excited to have those officers assume those new roles. And again, recruits, where the amount of recruitment is extremely busy within the OPP and getting wonderful candidates. So it's such a young detachment. I think policing in general. I was in Peel Region a couple of weeks ago, and you could see just the youth. Made me feel a bit older, but you could definitely see that from a policing profession, there's definitely a transition there. So we're really focusing, again, as I said previously, on mentoring and training those members to ensure that they're here for a long time and provide a great service to the community, but also make them resilient and a fulfilling career. So in terms of awards, we've had some members who received primarily bravery awards. So Sergeant Gloria Yu, PC Tremblay Faraldo, PC Benoit, PC Deschaines, Neil McTavish from Glengarry, and PC Leanne Morneau all received bravery awards, of which we're very proud. And a lot of our detachment members are involved in organizations and committees, both within the organization and outside of the organization, promoting various community and interest groups. So we're very proud of our members and all they contribute both on and off duty. So thank you. Any questions?
What is the process for acknowledging the awards, for bravery? Who makes that decision?
So there's an awards and recognition unit. So there's various levels of awards and commendation. Within detachment, they're called letter of counsel. So say on the off chance Simon Hardy does something good in his career, then they could write a letter of counsel saying Hardy did a great job this day at a mental health call or at a challenging call or what have you, and it goes on my file for a period of time. Should it be a life-saving award or Medal of Bravery or a commissioner's citation, then there's a form that's submitted called the COM 7, which is forwarded to the Regional Awards and Recognition Unit, and then that's forwarded to General Headquarters, where they review all these submissions, and at the end of the year they say, okay, Hardy deserves a Medal of Bravery or life-saving, and because it was life-saving, he should also get a St. John's Ambulance Award. And then regionally they will have, I don't know if you had the opportunity to take part in any of them, but regionally they will have award ceremonies once a year, at which point the commissioner will come and his command team, and they will present those awards and recognition. They'll present long service awards, so 20 years, 30 years, and any other awards. Also within the OPP, there's also something called accolade awards, so they can have like investigation of the year, team of the year, and again, those are submitted through General Headquarters. And a lot longer answer than I bet you expected, Mr. Chair, but that's always the way with Hardy. However, there's also external awards, so whether there's International Association of Chiefs of Police Awards, there's Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, there's also, like I've seen submissions through the states for like Trooper of the Year, but Canadian police officers have been recognized. And then there's also federal medals through the Governor General. So there's quite a process, but it's well worth the effort to recognize the efforts and bravery of many of our officers and dedication. And speaking to the advancement piece, again, there's a lot of there are awards in terms of new ideas and new programs and new methods of investigation, and you see that in the criminal investigations branch for major investigations, just the advances that they've had with cold cases in regards to using DNA and DNA banks and what have you. It's so.
One last question. You had mentioned 138. Right now they're doing a lot of curb work around the intersection of St. Andrews. I see that there's an officer that's been sitting, there overseeing any violations, traffic violations, because they shut the lights off and they have flag people. I was wondering, is that billed back to the contractor for the time that they're there?
So that would fall under a paid duty. So whether it be on the highway or primarily for construction or, for instance, the Highland Games, like security, if you have certain events, especially tied to the, for instance, tied to the, you know, if you have a liquor license or whatever, there might be stipulations that you have to have officers there. But from that, your example of construction, it's the company that will pay, it's a paid duty. So the companies build and pay the officers that way, so.
Yep, it will require a mover and seconder and reads that the draft 2025 Police Services Board budget be approved as presented and forwarded for consideration to the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry.
All those that are in favor? Oh. Motion is carried, and none opposed. Thank you. We do have a motion to adjourn, but nothing under new business. Okay, we have a motion to adjourn, please.
It's moved by Warden McDonald, seconded by Todd Lalonde, that the meeting adjourn to the call of the chair.
All those in favor? Carried. Thank you.